All right. It is Thursday, February 22nd. And 3 game developers on Overwatch have done an AMA on the competitive Overwatch subreddit, where people they mostly talk about perks, but I'm sure there's a few other kind of questions in here as well, baked into the game and stuff like that. It was Alec Dawson, lead gameplay designer, Kenny Hudson, senior game producer, and Scott Kennedy, aka Custa, former Owl player and talent. And so the community fielded various questions, and the developers answered, of course. So I figured I'd do a video, and we'll just kind of look over some of the answers as well to some of the questions that the community have. And we'll see how long this is. Actually, there's a lot of answers here. This is a big old text here. So we'll kind of just run through it and see what people ask and what they say. So starting off with Hypnoman. Which perks had the highest impact on hero performance? Will perks have a higher priority in terms of balance than the base hero perks? Or will we see a combination of both going forward? So Alec responds, some of the winners so far have been Ana, Bastion, Pharah, Ramatra, and Winston. So I'm guessing these are heroes that have had a significant win rate increase because of their perks. When it comes to individual perks, Ramatra's Vengeful Vortex, Mauga's Firewalker, Zarya's Energy Lance, and Soldier's 76 Agility Training have all been quite impactful. So he also said it's important to look at the combination of your minor and major perks. What rank thresholds players are using them at, and how quickly a hero is gaining these perks. There's still quite a bit for us to dig through there. In the immediate, we mostly plan on balancing perks in order to make them feel more impactful. There will still be some core kit tuning alongside that, but there'll still be a meaningful amount of change we want to inject into the system through the next few patches. Tuning to perks and actual perk swaps, hoping for some in 16.0, are included in that. So I think with these perks especially, you kind of have to consider like what rank people are playing at. Because I think a perk like Zarya's Energy Lance will obviously be more powerful when people stack up. And I think stacking up is way more prevalent in, for example, like metal ranks compared to, high Grandmaster ranks. And Soldier 76, I think, is being played a lot more, in a variety of ranks. And agility could be quite useful there. So this is very, like, rank dependent, I feel like. But it's a pretty good indication. I think Vengeful Vortex is quite interesting. Out of the ones that stand out here. But overall, pretty interesting to see here. These 4 perks in particular, Alec mentions, have been pretty strong for the hero. Reasonably Tracer into listen here as having some of the most highest impact. Ana's bouncing nade level 1 is not. Yeah, but I kind of think that those heroes were already strong, and so maybe the heroes didn't make them immediately much stronger. I mean, you look at this list here: Ramatra, Mauga, Zarya, Soldier. Like, I don't think any of these were like insanely strong at the time perks were implemented, and so they probably, had these perks as well, like really helped those heroes. But then I think, Ana's definitely on there. These heroes, Pharah is an example that has like really benefited from like moving Barrage, for example, and the Implosion is really good as well. Moving on, Triscan. Clash can be really fun when the stars align. Anything you can share about what you plan to do with the mode in the future? I was really looking forward to see the old 2CP max reworks. I agree with that. I still think that Hanoka is like a beautiful map, right? Oh, and speaking of old maps, any hope for Gothenburg to get a second life one day? Which is something I've also been asking for, because Gothenburg is sick and we didn't really get to explore it. Alec responds, like you, I also believe Clash is awesome when it all comes together. We actually spent a good amount of time on Clash scoring before we made the decision to pull it from competitive. Even with the scoring changes, we believe the mode needed some fundamental geo changes to points A and E to perform better as a competitive mode. Currently, we are experimenting with building another Clash map from the ground up with a different approach to the layout to see if that solves some of the core issues the mode has. So this is interesting. Experimenting with building another Clash map from the ground up. That's all very early, but hopefully some significant geo changes along with scoring changes can get Clash into a great spot. So I think if you consider both, Hanoka and it's not Temple of Anubis. It's an Anubis map anyway. Like A and E are just like insane, right? Like they're just insanely oppressive. And so it's quite interesting that they probably like started building the maps first for maybe like capture the flag or something. Like that's maybe possible. And then they were like, well, we kind of want to do Clash in this, but they're taking what they've learned from Clash as a mode and then they're adding, building maybe a map that more caters to the strengths of Clash while trying to fix some of the issues. So pretty interesting, enlightening answer there by Alec. Moving on to Banethor 88. kudos to the dev team for trying something so different. For me, it seems to be a hit already, and I can't wait to get my hands on Stadium. Chicken Red question. Did Junkenstein's revenge success serve as a spark for building a new game with talents more permanently to the game? Or was this always in the back of mind, given the amount of work that has gone into talent since Overwatch 2's development? So, this is the Halloween mode we had back in, what is that, October? Which is quite recent. I mean, that's like 3 months ago, but the system was pretty fleshed out already then. And then the follow-up as well. What was the thinking behind limiting perks down to just 2x2 choices? And is this something that you think could change in the future? So, maybe 3 perks per level or something like that. I personally really enjoyed how much more choices really led to different early and late game experiences. Alec, 1. Actually, neither. The true impetus for this was our need for a game sister layer to introduce more change into the core game. Having some talents to pull from was nice to have, but a large majority of the perks were built for the perk system specifically. The team had gotten really great at expanding kits, so there was plenty of good experience for us to bring good learnings into building perks. Junkenstein's lab gave us more signal for Stadium, and how much we could expand the brownstone Overwatch was still making it feel like Overwatch. So I kind of agree with that Junkenstein's lab, the way it was playing, definitely feels more like Stadium. As someone who's played Stadium, I feel like Junkenstein's lab is more similar to Stadium than it is to the perk system, because things get like insanely chaotic by the end of a Junkenstein's lab game, right? And it's also pretty similar in the way that like there's a bit of a break, you buy perks, or in that case, like, you know, some customization. So I agree with that, actually. It's pretty interesting. It gave signal for Stadium. Number 2, we played with a number of different iterations. Originally, we had 3 levels, but there was no choice. Didn't feel very different. Some iterations later, we gave players their minor perks passively, but you had a choice between 2 major perks later on in the game. So you had 1 minor perk, and then you just got it automatically. And then when you hit the major, then you would actually pick something. We really liked the choice that gave, so we decided to bring it in earlier at the minor perk level. Overall, we felt this was the right amount of change to introduce initially. We were changing some of the fundamentals of how Overwatch worked, and we're trying to measure how much we could disrupt that. Maybe we could have gone even further, but I think we're in a good place for now, and with time, we'll see how far the player wants us to take systems like this. So I think this is a really interesting point as well, because if you consider a game like Deadlock, for example, I think Deadlock just like overdoes it. Deadlock has too much choice. There's too many things. You have abilities, you're leveling up abilities, and then you got your freaking items as well, and it just gets like pretty insane. Like there's so much customization, there's so many choices to be made. And maybe that's pretty fun for some people, but it does get like pretty overwhelming. So it's pretty interesting how they explored what level of customization and choice within the game is actually the right one. Do you know if NA is playing FPL today? I don't know. Have not looked into that. But I think this is pretty interesting. You know, maybe they feel at some level that you know, they'll implement more change in the future. But, you know, they're measuring how you could disrupt that. But I feel like we're pretty landed in a pretty good spot. I like having 2 perk choices. I think having 1 more kind of becomes too much. But I also think, you know, the game scene is kind of evolving, right? Like we're seeing so many games these days introduce lots of different choices. Like Deadlock, for example, right? And so maybe down the line in like 3 years, maybe at that point, there is so much customization going on and people like customization that they'll implement like a 3rd perk level, and they'll speed up the process to achieve that, right? Moving on, Apostle. How does the team decide to get the fun perks like Pharah, Kiriko, Ana, who gets the new ability perks, Bastion, Orisa, Torbjörn? So like this is the self-repair, this is the shield, and for Torbjörn, what's the new ability for Torbjörn? Is it level 3 turret, sticky turret? Heal, I guess maybe healing armor. Who just gets number buffs? Reaper, Genji. Are the number buffs just placeholders who plans to go more extreme in the future to match the other heroes? Alec responds, well, the goal overall is to make fun perks for every hero. That can be more difficult on certain heroes though, as boosting certain elements of their kits can cause issues. Currently, the number buff perks are some of the perks we like the least, and plan on changing a handful of those over time. So this would be like Sojourn Ammo, for example. That's probably a perk they're looking at changing. This initial launch has given us plenty of signal on which perk combinations players find compelling and which ones they don't. So obviously, you know, they'll analyze all this data, but if they see that like people really like, you know, boost, like having fun with the hero rather than going for something that's, you know, straight up like a buff. Like I think the silly Torbjörn turret, it's like, do you want sticky turrets or do you want like level 3 turret? they'll break down this data and kind of see what they're doing moving forward. I think it's important for us to stay true to our values for minor and major perks. Your minor perks are supposed to be lighter, nice little upgrades. Your major perks are supposed to be transformative. We have some work to hit that goal for all of the heroes and offering more transformative major perks. So yeah, late game is going to get pretty chaotic. So I think we're seeing that in some heroes already. So looking out for more of that. Robman Fred's Fixer. Do you view perks as a way to limit the counterpicking and power spikes of certain heroes? If so, do you think they have shown early signs of achieving that, and what adjustments would you make going forward? Any examples of heroes you'd want to shore up in that respect? Alec responds, we did want to add more friction to counter-swapping, and we've seen that drop quite a bit since Season 15 launch. It'll be some time before players settle on how much less they want to counter-swap, but in ranked role queue, we've seen players swap about 25% less, and more so at the highest ranks. Masters Plus players swap much more than the ranks below that. For power spikes, the goal of the perk system isn't to limit power spikes. We actually introduce more power spikes and hopefully more texture to the individual hero's movement to moment gameplay through the perk system. We think a number of our heroes needed bigger moments than they previously had. So, it makes sense again. They think, some heroes, the kit makes sense. It makes sense with the hero design, the hero identity. But they still, I think Ramatra is a good example here, right? Your Vortex being able to explode is an example of an ability that just gets changed a little bit and might just add a little bit of spice to the Ramatra gameplay loop. Orisa as well. I think I've complained quite a bit on my stream about the Orisa gameplay loop, and having a javelin that you can charge up instead, that is an added thing to the gameplay loop, right? So kind of like what they were looking for here with the perk system to kind of change that, right? I'm curious. I'm interested in the counter swap because it's definitely one of the things people talk the most about. That people just want to have fun playing their hero, and if they're level 3, they don't want to swap off. But this doesn't sound too unhealthy. 25% less and more. It's frustrating sometimes if maybe your tank is getting hard countered and they're level 3 but don't want to swap. But I think it's at that point it's probably not as fun playing sad tank, so that kind of encourages swapping the hero as well. If that hero is truly being countered, they're not getting value. Unless they're a one-trick pony, they're probably gonna swap anyway, right? Even if they're level 3. Going forward, we are looking at raising some of the less impactful perks and making sure you feel there's a real choice between your minors and majors. We have a lot of opportunity to make that choice more interesting by cutting out some of the perks players aren't gravitating towards. Things like Roadhog's increase, peg pen, throw distance. Yeah, and I mean, some heroes have a pretty big choice in the minor and then, another major perk as well. So maybe they'll just substitute those where the major perk is really going to be a game-changing decision between two really good perks, rather than like you're seeing some heroes now. They have a really strong minor and a really big major. Maybe they'll nerf some of the bigger or popular minor perks then. NO32. In the spotlight, Alec mentioned a refresh of the perks in the middle of the year. Does that mean 4 brand new perks for everyone? Saw someone mention Aaron said something along those lines but couldn't find where. Or is it more a few perks will be changed out and tweaked if desperately needed here and there before the refresh? And the refresh is more thorough for perks that are less lopsided and not 4 brand new perks for everyone. The goal there will be that every new hero gets at least 1 new perk to play with. Still scoping out what the refresh will look for Season 18, but somewhere around 25 to 50% of the perks changing. Some being completely new and some receiving significant tuning. If we have perks that players really love, we don't really want to immediately remove those, and the refresh will be looking at perks that are more middling in the interest. So probably not removing double on a nano, but probably toying with the duration of the nano, right? That will probably still be a thing, right? I mean, this sounds a little low to me. Somewhere around 25 to 50% of the perks changing. I guess, if they changed a third of all perks in the game every 6 months, maybe that's enough. I'd probably lean more 50, right? Because I'm not too attached to the perks. I'd rather than change the perks more often than too little, right? But maybe we'll figure that out down the line. It's probably also hard to introduce a ton of new perks because you can only do so much, right? We'd also like to evaluate how the perk system functions overall at that point too. That could be including changes to the catch mechanics, gain rates, or even a starting level choice. Those are fairly early discussions though, and how this season goes will give us some insight on where to take perks next. I think a starting perk would be very interesting, but they've made this very clear that they want you to pick perks depending on what the enemy team is playing. And so a starting perk would have to be something that's kind of independent from what the enemy team is playing, right? Because it would suck if you rolled out of spawn and you picked up the quote-unquote wrong perk for what the opponent is playing, right? What were some interesting perks from Once Told Tale? What were some interesting perks that the team scrapped along the way? Alex responds, we play with a variety of movement perks for heroes that don't have much mobility. We wanted to see if we could do a movement perk for Torbjörn. I think it only lasted a place or two, but Torbjörn could launch himself off of his turret by double jumping on it. And the idea was that if you had a sticky turret, you could change the angle of that leap and catapult yourself into the backlines. Maybe we'll come back to that one day. It was certainly silly. All right, so, I mean, that sounds a lot of fun. That sounds very silly. But I'm kind of glad that they're not, implementing mobility creep. Because some heroes just straight up should not have mobility. And I think Torbjörn is one of those heroes. Like, get some movement speed with the overload. But I don't see a need for, like, even Reinhardt to an extent. Like, people are like, oh, the movement of Reinhardt is, like, too slow, right? Well, I mean, you have your charge. You can charge forward. You don't need to, like, have a Reinhardt that can contest high grounds. And I think some heroes really shouldn't toy with, like, vertical mobility in that way. Speckle's Power Trooper Torb kind of goes crazy. It does sound like a lot of fun, and I'm all for fun, but I do think that some heroes just, like, shouldn't have movement, probably. Nobs89, are there any ideas to make Mystery Heroes mode less stomping with new perks? Currently, perk system is another advantage that a winning team have compared to the team who's currently losing. I know it's just a non-competitive mode with no big priority, although there's a huge player base. It says we have a bit fix for this coming next week, actually. You'll get 2 random perks, 1 minor and 1 major each time you spawn. Okay. I mean, they're going all out in Mystery Heroes. That sounds pretty fun. Conflux, what's the overall design goals pillars for perks? For some people, hero perks seem to be covering weakness they may have for Drift Rutters or Reaper's dire triggers. So they're obviously like, they're taking heroes that are struggling with something, and they're introducing a perk that kind of makes this hero a little bit better. And, maybe they could introduce this to the base kit at some point. Like, I know, instead of a Reaper rework, they gave the dire triggers, to make Reaper a little bit better at the range, right? So maybe they'll implement that into the base kit at some point, but yeah, they covered a weakness here. While other perks seem to be allowing players more skill expression. Sigma's a massive impact. That's if you hit like a long range one. Anna's biotic bounce. And some perks just seem odd or unfitting for the hero. Sombra's white hat or Mora's contamination. Is there a set philosophy for perks that can be shared with the community? Because it seems like perks are trying to solve a lot of problems in the sandbox. Alec responds. Perks are mainly about creating new things for your heroes to do, increasing situational viability and giving you more agency over your in-match experience. For that goal of increasing the amount of situations in which a hero can be viable, that can come through via shoring up weaknesses against certain heroes. That can also come through by adding mobility so certain heroes can be played on more maps. That goal led to perks like Junkrat's Frag Cannon, Sigma's Levitation, and many more. For perks like Sombra's White Hat, that is fulfilling a particular hero fantasy that many players want us to lean into, and we think it's an interesting opportunity the perk system creates. Over time, we'll see how players respond to some of those more off the meta wall ones. Some of those more off the wall ones. Metastable, metastable to chaos. Wow, reading names, Reddit names, is the biggest challenge of this video. Very important question. Will the new heroes since Overwatch 2's release be getting dance emotes? Kenny, I don't know when everyone's dance emotes are coming in, but I can confirm that Ramatra is up next and soon TM. Okay, Ramatra's getting a dance emote. Son of Gary, are perks going to start rotating next season, or are you going to wait and let the current batch simmer for a bit before changing them? Bouncing off of that, if you're looking at specific underperforming, less interesting perks now, which ones are on the potential chopping block? A lot of my friends have noted the extra throw range on Hog Junk Trap as being quite weak. Finally, do you have any desire to ever add another level to perks? Either something in between minor and major, or do you have something above major? We're going to start rotating in some new perks in Season 16. Great, love it. But before we get there, we got a bunch of balance changes and tweaks coming in Season 15 mid-cycle patch, and there are good things coming for some underperforming perks. Things like Hog Toast now increasing the damage of Pigpen. Juno's double jump reset perk is also going to increase the duration of glide boost. I really like the increased glide boost. I think that's very interesting. Damage of Pigpen? I mean, I'm a Roadhog hater, so call me a bit of a skeptic here. On the other end of the spectrum, Bastion's self-repair resource meter is coming back, which sounds very healthy because, my god, the self-repair was just out of control. We did a ton of iteration on how many levels perks should come with. There were a version with 2 levels up through, I think, 4, and even one where we eventually had all minor and major perks. 3 levels has been the sweet spot for a while, but that's not to say the system can evolve still a bit early, but it's a system that can evolve if needed be. I also really like how they're just they just sound very adaptable, like very, like they'll just kind of like see how it goes, and they're very open to changing things. Like in a year's time, maybe for, if they do a PvP reset, like they call it, maybe they'll just like, change up the amount of levels, stuff like that. They're very much just looking to make the best game possible, right? Mod William, was pre-selecting perk presets ever considered? Kenny responds, we did discuss the idea of pre-selecting perks, and the original design even had an interface for them as a loadout in the hero gallery. But once we started playtesting the abilities themselves, there were a lot of situations where we want to go with a different perk based on the situation at hand. Being locked into a choice made prior to really being 100% on what you would want to choose felt like the worst option than always giving yourself options. That's not to say this couldn't change as people get used to the choices and their playstyle with perks come a bit cemented though. So kind of like aligns with what we heard from them before. A lot of people want pre-selecting perks. They want perk kits or what have you. You can select them before the game. But they want us to be like a system where you adapt throughout the game. And like while you're in the game, while you're playing the match, you make a meaningful choice depending on what map you're on, what composition you're playing, and who you're up against. Because that will make the perk system more rewarding, right? So it kind of makes sense they want to shy away from like pre-selecting stuff. Cryptographer, what is a primary weapon archetype you either want to fit in that you haven't yet or think at the very least underexplored? Kenny responds, the one weapon that always comes up during the what's next discussion is the flamethrower. We'd love to get one in, but it's gotta be epic. Oh, I actually haven't thought of that. That actually sounds like a lot of fun, but also a bit chaotic in that regard. That can be absolute mayhem. Mod William asks, do we have any stats on which perk selections are the most one-sided? Example given, one perk is picked over the other 90% of the time. Scott Custa responds, we do have stats to show perk selection rates per hero. I would say it's variable depending on the hero and the rank that they're being selected. In general, when a perk has an incredibly high pick rate, it's due to the other option not being enticing. For example, Rodok's Minor Hog Toss isn't picked very often compared to Scrap Hook. Makes sense. Why would you want to throw your a thing further than getting 2 ammo on a hook? Other options like Ramada's Void Surge is a cool perk to play with that increases the hero's damage, so it's much preferred over the simpler defensive option, Prolonged Barrier. I don't really care about 4 or 5 seconds Ramata Barrier. Much rather have a shotgun as Ramata. Overall, the perk selection rates are one-sided are the ones you would expect, and we're using these stats and feedback to identify which perks need to be either balanced or changed in the future. Brutal Rogue 99 asked, are there any perks that you've seen a lot of praise for that you think you could potentially incorporate into the hero's base kit? So going back to like Reaper with the long-range shotguns or Flying Barrage, Scottster replies, there aren't any current plans to implement specific perks into hero kits, but there are perks that have helped heroes in ways that could lead to changes in the future. I think the big example of this would be Bastion. The perks have helped fill in some of the holes in their kit. For example, Armored Artillery, making the ultimate more dynamic. This is when you get overhealth for using your ultimate. Smart Bomb helping Bastion's lack of mobility, and Self-Repair aiding survivability issue. A resource limitation is coming in the mid-season patch. These perks have made the hero both better overall, but much more fun to play as well. This was some of the major goal perks we're trying to accomplish. But I can see us taking some parts of perks and putting them into the base kit as heroes change in the future. So yeah, I can see Armored Artillery getting overhealth in your ult. That I could very much see. Self-Repair probably should remain a perk, right? But interesting. I think they'll definitely do this in the future if it makes sense for the given hero. Then just add a new perk on top and make a perk like default for the hero kit. Captain Ravage. This is for Custa. What was the thought process behind giving Ana headshots despite the fact you cannot hit crits? Yo! Custa replies, good thing for those who can't hit headshots like me, we have double nano boost. True, way more easier to use. I'm never selecting headshots because I can't hit headshots at all. Mountain Ape, following up the above comment, and perhaps more seriously, Scott, how many shoeies have you done while on campus, and how many team members have you convinced to join you? Custa replies, not enough, so 0. Company man. Robe Manfred's Fixer. Which perks, too good or too bad, are you monitoring the most? Do you plan on fully replacing perks every 6 to 12 months, or would you rather keep the ones that are working, adjust the ones that are almost there, and swing for defenses by replacing the rest? Custa replies, there are definitely some on the radar that we're keeping an eye on. Obviously, Tracer's major perk Flashback was one that we are very wary of and are looking to see how impactful this perk can be. I believe this is the 3 blinks on recall. Obviously, very strong. Mobility perks like Sara's minor jump ups, this gives her a lot of vertical mobility. It's really strong on some maps, Scott says as well. But its pick rate varies dramatically depending on the rank. So I can see like high rank, really good at abusing this perk. Lower rank, not as much. There's a list of perks that have been underperforming both in win and pick rate that we're actively looking at to make balance changes or even replace them starting in Season 16. The goal is to make every set of minor and major perks feel like there is a choice to be made depending on your playstyle, the map, and how the match is going. If a perk feels like it's always the right choice or the wrong choice, then we want to make changes. So, your favorite heroes, where you pick the same perks all the time, everyone does, can definitely expect some of those perks to be changing because, again, they want it to be a meaningful choice, not the same thing every time. Missless asks, hi, this question is with Custa. How are you so smart, talented, and amazing at your job? Oh my god, the glaze. Jesus Christ. But more seriously, what are the developers' favorite perks? Not necessarily the best ones, but their favorite. Custa replies, thank you for the kind and honest question. I personally had the most fun with Craftsman. If you haven't tried chasing your pinning Reinhardt to give him some armor, it's a lot of fun. Come, there's no way. There's no Torb out there that is enjoying repairing armor. I mean, who wants to chase after their insane tank player and try to heal armor? That's cap. I agree, Cactus Puppy. That is just cap. I mean, look, I'll repair, if I'm doing with math, but by God, no. No. Chasing your pinning Reinhardt. I mean, it's silly. It's silly. In quick play, I do it. It's super funny. All right. Maybe I need to give it a go. Other notable mentions would be Farah's concussive implosion and Sarah jump ups. I think Sarah jump ups is a lot of fun. It's really fun to explore the high ground, stuff like that. Super Slave Matt, howdy. Wanted to ask how the team decides when to strictly buff an ability versus when to give it a drawback. Stuff like Sombra's lockout duration increasing but decreasing her hack range by 30%, and Mercy's flash heal being tied to rest, where using flash heal means you can't rest for 15 seconds, and using rest means you can't flash heal for 30 seconds. But then when we see Tracer getting all her blinks back on recall as a massive boost despite no drawback, like freezing her blink CD or increasing her recall CD, do you see yourself introducing drawbacks to more perks, or reducing existing ones to shake up under/overperforming perks? Custa responds, when first ideating it on perks, the team included more perks that had strong benefit but a drawback. It was found that in some situations it could feel worse to play a perk even if the benefit was strong. This can be seen currently with Sombra's Major, Stack Overflow. We wanted to give players an option to be able to increase the lockout duration to secure more kills, but reduce the range to make it riskier. We received a lot of feedback that this perk doesn't feel good to use or play against, so we're planning on making a balance change to help and potentially replace it in the future. We want to avoid situations like these in the future, and in the instance we do have a perk that has a drawback, want to ensure that the other perk option doesn't also have a drawback, there's a beneficial option. This is actually feedback I gave to Custa like a couple days into the perks as well. I was like, if I have to make a perk choice, I don't want two perks that fundamentally change my gameplay loop if I'm already satisfied with it. Like, it's nice to always have a perk option that just straight up makes my character better, and there's no drawback. But if you have two perks with two drawbacks, and you want to deal with neither of them, then it kind of feels bad. And so I guess that's what we're kind of trying to fix with Sombra too. Alright, here's my question. I'm curious what the upper limitations are of perks as it relates to hero design and hero identity. For example, I think Mercy is a good example of a hero that does not have the same level of skill expression as Tracer. Obviously, just an example. Would there be a world in which Mercy would receive a perk that could potentially elevate Mercy's skill expression in exchange for more impact? Additionally, do you view perks as seasonal, in which, for example, extreme example, one season of Overwatch Mercy might lean into the damage boost aspect, whereas in future seasons, for the purpose of changing things up, Mercy might even get a perk in which you can speed boost teammates instead. I think this could potentially be a pretty dramatic but fun way to change up the game, and have some heroes still be played but not conventionally fitting into certain compositions. But perhaps in your eyes it's a bit extreme for the purpose that Mercy's kit is supposed to serve. So, my thought process was here, Mercy sucks to play with, because she doesn't really do anything. So what if you introduce perks to make Mercy fun to play with? Then you don't have to change the base kit, but a perk could at least make it a bit more forgiving when you have a Mercy on your team. And then I think the seasonal aspect is pretty interesting, because the way I kind of think about perks is similar to the way Diablo would some modifiers on, whatever, their gear, when it comes to building skill builds in Diablo, modifiers in, what do they call it, like the dungeons or whatever. And every season is hype for Diablo, because you want to queue into Diablo and just be like, how does it feel to play this season? What spec do I have to build this season, right? And I kind of like that you log on for a season and you're like, oh, how do I play my character differently each season? So it sounds like they're pretty slow right now in the way they're going to change perks. But I think changing the gameplay loop every couple of seasons could be really fun for the characters, even if it's just a small way. So, Mercy increasing movement speed. I don't think it's too terrible. Like, you're seeing Zarya. Zarya gives movement speed with their perk in the bubble, right? I think a teammate gets 50% movement speed if you bubble them. That's a perk. Why couldn't there be a perk in which Mercy can give movement speed to an individual target? Like, I don't see why that would be a problem. And sometimes that speed would come in handy because speed is really good. But Mercy is a very slow hero. That's damage boosts and heal. Custa replies, "Hey Johnny, for the first round of perks, we were focusing on adding perks that enhance or change the way you play heroes. In the future, we could implement more transformative perks that could add skill expression or change the style in which you would currently play a hero." So, I guess we got our answer. Maybe in the future. I wouldn't say that perks have seasonal themes in which they will be assigned to play a hero a certain way, but we've learned a lot about what perks are the most interesting and fun. We're also seeing the impact they can have on a hero's win and play rate. So, I think they're just kind of like, yo, we're not going to change them that often, where they're not, they kind of just the character, but better. They're not the character, but different. They're the character, but better. I don't know if that makes sense. So I guess I kind of got my answer, but I hope they do with the skill expression stuff, because I do think that, because that way you can keep Moira bad at the pro level while introducing perks that make Moira good at the pro level. And you don't have as much of a problem with it. So that's kind of what I was hoping for. Sakainu. Now the perks are in players' hands, what is your approach going to be moving forward when it comes to balancing and iterating on them? Are you planning on radically changing perks in the future? And are you currently looking at adjusting the perks that have underperforming when it comes to pick rates? In regards to Stadium, I'm very excited to try it. Can you shed some light on the regularity with which we can expect to see heroes added to Stadium? I would love to see what crazy upgrades you have in mind for Wrecking Ball. So, let's see what they say about Stadium here, if Scott mentioned it. Custa response, for now the primary goal is focused to adjusting the perks that are underperforming, overperforming. We will have a balanced patch, I'm guessing here, coming through in Season 15 mid-season patch, and we'll be swapping out some perks that haven't been performing well in Season 16. Pick and win rates are important factors in deciding what needs to be changed, but there's also a lot of great feedback we receive about perks that don't feel good to use or play against. I wouldn't say there are a lot of radical changes to perks in the near future, but we will be working to ensure perks feel good to use for all heroes. So, no mention of Stadium here, because I think Stadium is an entirely separate team as well. They've said this, I think they have a dedicated team that works strictly on Stadium, and so this is not these guys, they focus on the perks. Batslot, and this is the final question. Will changing perks mid-game ever become an option? Custa response, we want it to feel like you're making a meaningful choice when you select your perk, and when allies, enemies select their perk, you understand what to expect on that hero for the match. We understand that there is an issue with people accidentally selecting a perk and being unable to change it. This is something we're keeping an eye on to see if there's something that can be done to help this. I won't say that it will never be an option to swap your hero's perks in the future, but there are currently no plans to add changing perks mid-game. I kind of don't expect them to do this as well, because I think it really messes with your expectation of what the enemy hero does as well. Like, for example, if you already seen the enemy hero use something, like a bouncing nade, and then you swap Wrecking Ball, and then they have Groggy all of a sudden, that feels pretty bad. Because you're like, I can't win. Like, they've made a meaningful choice, and I can't win. At that point, you're kind of like reducing the reward of making the meaningful choice. Because you can always, you're not making the meaningful choice. Like, you're just making choices all the time. And at that point, it doesn't really become meaningful in the same way as you're selecting a perk, and you're committed to that perk, right? For Winston, for example, I think a big one would be the major perk, whereas you have the Chain Lightning, and then you have the Bubble Health, which both play very differently. But if I could just swap back and forth, then I'm kind of like losing what makes it a meaningful choice in the first place. So I don't expect them to do that because I think it degrades the meaningfulness of the choice. And I also think that it messes with the anticipation of what the enemy hero and player is doing, which makes the game feel more confusing and probably more upsetting in that regard as well. So I don't expect them to introduce something that changes it mid-game. But there you go. That's the developer AMA on perks on February 27th. I guess perks have been out now for like, what, 9 days? Has it been 9 days? I think so. So there you go. If you had any questions about perks, hopefully this interview, this AMA shined some light on it. So thank you, Alec, Kenny, Scott, for all your answers. Do appreciate it. that's gonna do it. That's gonna do it for this video. So goodbye, YouTube. Bye, YouTube.